So I do like historians when they write opinion pieces in newspapers because very often it's often a, a side of an opinion you don't often hear. As historians are very much maligned when it comes to journalistic practices. But this, I think, by David Edwinton, I think could very well happen and likely happen now. So Boris Johnson might break up the UK, and that's a good thing. It's time to let the fantasy of the British nation die. The United Kingdom may be finally coming to an end. On Thursday, Parliament passed the withdrawal agreement on which Prime Minister Boris Johnson successfully campaigned for in last month's general election. By the end of the month, it will be signed into law. The United Kingdom will leave the European Union on January 31st. But as we've discussed before, even though, quote, we leave the European Union, we don't actually leave the European Union. That just is the next step on the Brexit path. Like I say, it is just the beginning of the beginning. For decades, membership of the European Union held the glue together of a fragmenting United Kingdom. Now Brexit is tearing it apart. The short-lived fantasy of the British nation, too may finally meet its end. Mr Johnson's plan is likely to lead to a border between Northern Ireland and Britain for the first time in modern history. The policy, designed to allow Britain to radically break with Europe, while Northern Ireland remains aligned, remains aligned with the rest of the bloc, including the Republic of Ireland. It is astonishing betrayal of the Ulster Unionists, whose politics is predicated on the sanctity of the United Kingdom, and drawing Northern Ireland into the same regulatory system as its southern neighbour poses a remarkable opportunity for the nationalists, a once more united Ireland firmly in view. That certainly hasn't gone unnoticed in Scotland. The pro-independent Scottish Nationalist Party, which took 48 of Scotland's fixed 59 seats in December elections, reads the writing on the wall. A large majority of Scots voted to remain in the European Union during the 2016 referendum. To allow Northern Ireland but not Scotland to remain aligned with the European Union's market will only add to the sting. Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP's leader, has already formally requested that the Scottish Parliament be given the powers to hold an independence referendum. Mr Johnson, for his part, has made it very clear that he intends to stand in the way of such a vote, but he may not be able to block it forever. So this may be the end, but not this week, but perhaps by the end of the decade. First Scotland, then Northern Ireland, leaving just England and Wales, a mini-union from which itself could break up under pressure from Welsh nationalists. So, would that be really bad? Actually, it wouldn't be. The breakup of the Union certainly wouldn't be easy, but it may be one of the few good things to come out of Brexit, not just for Scotland and Ireland, but also perhaps especially for England. After being released from the Unionist grip, Northern Ireland could join a flourishing Irish economy and a more social liberal one. How things have changed. For the nationalists, it will be representing a long-desired reunion, although the Irish unity is what Unionists most fear. They might now be able to reconcile themselves to their Irishness after being betrayed by London. Scotland could take its own future in its hands, and it has a higher mortality rate than England, and while it is less unequal than its southern neighbour, the gap between them has narrowed over the past 2 decades. Scots have put off dealing with these issues by putting the blame on London. Independence will drive them off that excuse and force them to face divisions in their own society, which is true. I am, I'm not Scottish. If I was, there's no way I would vote for independence because, to me, even now, the troubles afterwards would spell disasters, both economically, socially, you name it. Scotland will be in absolute turmoil permanently, and that's not me making things up. That's just how Scotland is as it stands now. You've got to remember that even though Nicola Sturgeon looks to be leading a somewhat united party, a lot of her party are very, very anti-EU. So there is that to factor in. But yeah, I don't think Scottish independence is a good idea. But if they want it, they should have it. But they should know there will be consequences for that independence. And I see, and I've said this before on this channel, I see a lot of Scottish nationalists denying that fact, which I think in itself is a dangerous position. Okay. So an independent Scotland will come into its own political identity rather than just one premised on just contrasts. And even England would benefit. Despite it being the dominant nation in the United Kingdom, the arrangement hasn't been good for it. It doesn't have a sense of itself as a nation to be transformed and is divided between the vibrant, youthful, pro-European big cities, especially London, and the aging, stagnating, and anti-European rest of the country. Freed from the grip of the decade of the dying British nation, the British state, England, could be finally done with its delusion of grandeur. Fanciful beliefs about British importance in the world would crumble. England would only be around the 8th largest economy in the world, and it would probably have to give up its nuclear weapons, the United Kingdom's nuclear base in Scotland. England need not be, as many fear, a rump United Kingdom. So parochial, perhaps even iridist, less closure, more understanding of its real place in the world. It may soon rethink its hostility to the European Union. Scotland suffered a process of deaustralisation similar to Northern and England and Wales, but it voted to remain. As another writer, Anthony Barnett, and others suggest, a progressive English nation on the model of the Scottish one could emerge. This England might have an orderly democratic nationalism that understands its own aspirations and those of others. The idea of breaking up the Union isn't quite as outrageous as it might seem. The United Kingdom is neither ancient nor stable. Before 1945, national Irish, Welsh and Scottish English identities were for many not local varieties of national Britishness, but part of much something bigger, an imperial identity. British World War II propaganda explained that the United Kingdom was just one equal element of a British Commonwealth of nations that, along with India and the colonies, made up the British Empire. It was the empire that fought the war, not the United Kingdom. Soldiers died for king and country, but that country had no name. No one died for the United Kingdom. After 1945, Britain, a national United Kingdom, was one that many post-imperialist constructions that emerged from the ashes of the British Empire. From then until the 1970s, the United Kingdom existed as a coherent economic, political, and ideological unit, distinct from the rest of the world. There was the national British economy, a national British army, and national British politics dominated by two national unionist parties. It was a brief period of British nationhood. In fact, it was the only one. The national United Kingdom was broken up economically starting in the 1970s by the closely related process of globalization and depending on the economic integration with Europe. It is this decaying British nationalism, a leftover from the 1970s, that is now disrupting the Union. Not the self-conscious Scots, Irish and Welsh versions, but strong in England but weak everywhere else. With the exceptions of a handful of hardcore Unionists in Northern Ireland, this British nationalism manifested itself in the calls for Brexit before the 2016 referendum and up to today. And we've explained this before. You have to understand how the empire and the fantasies of it has really polluted British life and societies and created very, very grandiose fantasies that just aren't true. The Brexiteers wrongly believe that the independence from the European Union will make the United Kingdom great again. But Brexit and the delusions of the United Kingdom's grandeur that go with it are the politics for the age of those who remember that brief experience of a united national United Kingdom. The young people of England, like those of the rest of Britain, are overwhelmingly in support of remaining in the European Union. They also understand that we need liberation from the practices of Westminster and Whitehall, not Brussels, and from this self-defeating age-old rage. A few decades ago, a new United Kingdom emerged from the Empire. Now, by forcing the breakup of the Union, the old drinking deep the delusions of British nationalism may make it possible for a new England to emerge from the United Kingdom. I agree with that. There's no way better to put it, really.